What's up, everybody? I'm Sam Lance with Jackson Bezdek, and we have another episode of The Hum, a Kansas Hoops podcast for you today. Bez, we are up to episode 60, 6-0 here on The Hum, and what a ride it's been. Before we kind of get into everything, I just wanted to thank everybody for watching and tuning in. It really is an honor to bring you guys Kansas basketball content all the time, so thank you guys for sticking around watching us.
100%. It just the amount of viewers increase we've had this year. The number doesn't really matter to Sam and I. We would do this if three people watched and listened, but it's just cool that, we're kind of forming a little community here over at the Hum and up to 60 now. Like, I would have been cool with 20, Sam. That would have been enough for me. But yeah, shout out to Jeff, Rob, all those guys for letting us keep rolling. We're having a good time.
And we're cruising right on through. And today we got another busy episode. We got the TCU game that happened last night. We'll kind of be going over that. And then we'll also be previewing Houston with one of their beat writers, probably one of the biggest games on the schedule for Kansas this year. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Episode 60 of The Hum, a Kansas Hoops podcast. All right, Bez, let's get into TCU. Kansas walks away with a 74-61 win on the road in Fort Worth there. Kansas was down 24-10 at one point in the first half, and I was kind of sitting around with some buddies watching this one, and it was full on panic mode for all of us. But then Kansas just kind of started chipping away at the lead there in that first half. It was a 2-point game at halftime. And then in the second half, this Jayhawk squad just loved playing great basketball in the second half. Ended up outscoring TCU 41-26 in the final frame. From the point that it was 24-10, Kansas outscored TCU 64-37. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I don't know really why Kansas keeps getting out to these slow starts, but in the end, they were victorious. 5 different players ended up in double figures. So, Jackson, my question is to you. What's your main takeaway, as always? What do you think of this one?
So, had practice last night, and Wednesday night practices are like mine. They're the ones I get to run. So, they're the ones I most look forward to. And so, I'm like, phone off. I'll watch the game when I get home tonight, like I normally do. And it's just blowing up at like 6:30, 6:40. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? I'm like, oh, KU's playing tonight. I wonder what that is. First session ends at 7. I go to check. It is 90 messages I'm scrolling through of just, it's over, throwing in the towels, season's cooked, Bill's done, Hunter's the worst player. And then, like, I look at the score and it was tied. So that was kind of my initial reaction to it. But, dude, is Hunter not giving away that ball the turning point of the season or what? I mean, the run after that in itself was pretty big. But, yeah, the start, I don't know, just looks sluggish. It looks choppy. The offense doesn't look good. Like, I would love to see a game where Kansas plays good offense for 40 minutes. And, we'll get into it later, but I don't think that's going to be this Saturday. But I don't know if I can be fully confident heading into Big 12 tournament time in March if I haven't seen that yet. And, at the end of the day, TCU is not good. Kansas is very talented. That's what should have happened. But it's definitely still concerning that you can't play 40 good minutes of basketball.
Yeah, to your point, with all the messages, I always camp in the Discord, the game chat, during these games, and it was just funny how it went from exactly what you were talking about. The season is over, and then I remember somebody put in there like, "We're going to the national championship,"
Yeah.
like literally 10 minutes later,
10
right?
minutes tops.
So, Kansas fans love to overreact to everything, and that's exactly what we're here to do as well. Is overreact game by game. It's Final Four one game. We're terrible the next game. That's just what we do. So let's talk about probably the biggest storyline from this game, and that's AJ Storr having some life. Finally having some life in this game. AJ Storr ends up with 12 points, 6 of 10 from the field, but I think what was most impressive is his 6 rebounds and 3 steals. He was getting after it on the defensive end, Bez, what did you just make of AJ Storr having probably his best game in a Kansas uniform?
Great. Thank goodness. Needed. I mean, we're not going to get the AJ Store we thought we were going to get coming into the season. I'm okay accepting that. If he's a really awesome sixth or seventh man and can get you 10 to 12 and give you efforts on the defensive side, that is miles better than where we were last week talking about like, is he just, as Bill, just going to camp him at the end of the bench? So it was really nice to see. It was super like refreshing, and it's just another guy. It's another guy that can do a lot of different things, and that's what we've been expecting this whole time. But I mean, he had the most minutes off the bench. Like I need that every single game going forward now, and that is on AJ at this point. We've seen you. We saw this game. We know what you can do. You've had a couple other spurts like it. Not lately though, and if you're not getting 6 boards, 3 steals, or something close to that, a steal, a couple deflections, 4 rebounds, that's the kind of stuff Bill needs out of everybody. And AJ, kind of like we talked about, I think it was with Fanta who brought it up. He was playing losing basketball for his other teams. He's not a losing player, I don't think, but he was not a part of winning basketball. And that's every aspect of the game. So should it have taken him to mid-January to figure that out? No, it shouldn't have. But here we are, mid-January. It seems like he's kind of figuring it out, and it definitely seems like Bill's leash is getting a little longer with him, and he actually seems like pretty fired up for him too.
Yeah. This was huge, guys. I mean, Kansas needs kind of that third scorer right now. Zeke Mayo and Hunter Dickinson, I really don't think by themselves can take this team to where it wants to go. Somebody else has to step up. And if AJ Storr, like you said, can be that 10 to 12 points per game off the bench kind of guy, like he comes in with that second unit and, okay, AJ, go. Like this is you. I think that'll be huge for Kansas. A couple tweets that I thought were just absolutely hilarious last night, Bez. Nick Swart, obviously, always following along with him. Ryan Reinhart with the Ain't No Seats podcast. Reinhart says basically, like every time AJ Storr hits a shot, it feels like he just hit a game winner in the Elite Eight. And Nick responds to that tweet that it feels like the fate of the universe is on the line every time he catches the ball. And it is just so true. It is so true. Like every time AJ gets the ball and I'm watching the game, I'm like, okay, let's go. Let's do this. Come on. Like, please. And last night it finally clicked. It was fun to see.
There's definitely a feeling like that. And I bet Bill feels the same way, honestly. And that's probably the funniest part of like because everything he does is under such a giant microscope now. Like everyone is watching AJ really closely. Everyone is watching for his body language. Everyone is watching for like the self AJ interactions on the bench. Are they yelling at each other? Is AJ talking back? Everybody's locked into that. So when he's playing really, really well, it feels like you're winning an Elite Eight game because you're like, oh my gosh, if he's playing well, who the hell is going to stop this team? And I think that's kind of the excitement that everybody's feeling right now after one decent AJ Store game.
Yeah, I mean, even Self said it. AJ was really good. He was terrific. As Mike Vernon would say, he used the T word. Self loves using the terrific word, and if you get a terrific from Bill Self, you're doing some good things. This is what the full quote he said. Defensively, he was active. He got a couple steals and ran through some passes and was more aggressive, driving the ball and everything else, scoring the ball. He said, "quote That's probably the longest stint he's been able to play through some mistakes. So I thought he was really good tonight."
Great call from Bill there. I totally agree. Terrific. He loves terrific. That is so
I
funny.
know.
Like, yeah, he didn't have 25, but him being terrific so much stems from the other stuff. Like, AJ, we know you can score. And I'm
Effort.
sure
It was
they see
effort.
it constantly in practice. AJ is probably just getting bucket after bucket in practice. Nobody on the team can guard him one-on-one. But it's all the other stuff. And when he does that other stuff, Bill is gonna that's a terrific game in Bill's eyes. So let's keep that up, AJ. Keep it going forward. No more defensive lapses. No more getting subbed out a minute into the half because you're screwing up. Let's keep it tight. Let's keep it focused. Let's go on a run, baby.
Yeah. Kansas is going to need him against Houston. Kansas is really going to need him against Houston because that's going to be an absolute rock fight. All right, let's move on to Flory because I think Flory was probably the best player in the game. Question
Yes,
mark.
yes.
In this one, he had 10 and 10, 4 blocks. Uh, I'm just out of words for
Oh,
Flory
good.
Duncan nowadays because he is just so good, Bez. He is so good.
He, him and DP next year could be the biggest problem in college sports. However, I need Florida to chill just a bit,
He's
just a
not
bit.
going anywhere, Bez. Just relax. He's not going.
He is unbelievable. He is one of the best athletes in the entire country playing this sport right now. He is so good, and he has basically no offensive skill set yet. Like, let's think about that. He needs a jump hook, and he's probably first team All Big 12 next year. I'm pretty excited about what's happening with Flory Bidunga right now. I mean, if he comes back, if when KJ comes back and Flory gets 16 minutes a game, I'm throwing my phone into a lake. Play this man some minutes. He was literally the best player on your team. And next to Hunter Dickinson, like it'd be really easy for him to get drowned out by all the post feeds into Hunter and all the attention that Hunter gets defensively. But he just doesn't. He just fits in wherever Bill needs him to fit in. You need me to run the five? I can run the five. You need me to run the four? I'll run the four. I can block shots or I'll box out and rebound. I can literally do all of that. And man, what a weapon that is. And he has lived up to every expectation we had for him preseason. If I don't want to speak for you, Sam, but for me,
Oh,
it absolutely has.
exceeded. Exceeded.
He
He has 27 blocks, Bez, in 264 minutes. That's
That's
most on Kansas. He's past Hunter Dickinson now, who has 517 minutes and 26 blocks. I mean, imagine if Flory had been playing a lot more minute load the whole entire season. Right now, he's at 14.7 minutes per game. If he gets up, it's just insane. Like, how many games has he had now with 4+ blocks? He had 6 against UCF. He's had a block in every single game besides the West Virginia game in conference play. He had 6 UCF, 4 against Iowa State, and 4 against TCU. And he's shooting like 90% from the field, it
yeah,
seems like. He
yeah.
just doesn't miss
That
any
baby
shots.
does.
So Flory's just fun. He's just fun. Like that is literally on our little outline. That's what I have titled this segment.
It's fun.
Flory is fun because he
It is
is.
fun. And it's like, think about it. Flory plays 25 minutes. How do how does he play bad? Because he's not gonna miss and he's gonna guard and rebound. So really, your only way you're getting a bad Flory game is if he
Ouch.
fouls and if it's early, like 2 fouls in 4 minutes. Outside of that, he's playing right now, and the way he plays with this team, he like can't be a zero or a negative. He's going to give you something because he doesn't need the ball, and when you give him the ball, it's going in at an absurd rate right now because he's mostly dunking it. But and then the defensive stuff, man, like dude, he's gonna get a block or two if you play him 10 minutes. He's going to. Like there's really no negative to having him out there because even matchup wise, he can guard a 6'5" guard. He is totally capable of doing that. It is to me, it's literally just the fouls. Of if he doesn't foul, I would play him the entire game unless he's tired. Because he's not going to be a zero. He is going to give you something.
Yeah, I'm with you. I just really hope his minutes don't get limited when KJ Adams is back. I think it's funny that last night Christian Brown tweeted after the start, that like, oh, like what do you know? It's not KJ, that's the issue. And then from that moment, Kansas went on like, a 64-37
Right.
run,
Absolutely.
which is a little hilarious. But I'm not saying that Kansas doesn't need KJ back or doesn't want KJ back or not even that I don't want KJ back, but whenever KJ does come back, I think you got to play Flory more, if not equal minutes at this point. Because really, like, what does KJ bring that Flory doesn't? Like maybe a little bit more defensive versatility, but I
Yeah.
think Flory's better like makes this offense better because the offensive rebounding aspect. Like he gobbles up offensive rebounds. The spacing is the same. I don't know. And it's hard. It's hard for somebody who's not a big to guard Flory at the four spot. So any team that doesn't really have two bigs to put out there, like Flory's going to dominate that matchup.
Yep. KJ gives you actually a lot more IQ on the defensive end. The team defense is better when he's in. But at the same time, it's like I am noticing the rebounding difference. Like I feel it. And KJ was doing a very nice job of that before he got hurt. His like last 4 games leading up to that, he was averaging around 5 or 6 boards a game, which is where Kansas needs him to be at. But Flory is he grabs everything he can, and it's 10 rebounds next to Hunter Dickinson, Sam, who is like career averaging 12 a game. Like it's absurd that he's been as productive as he is, and Kansas needs KJ. They do, and the nice thing about KJ is he's a no ego guy. You can slide him right back in. But is Bill gonna big ego his way back into KJ 32 minutes? Like I am a little worried about that, right? And I see you look at your face, you're terrified of that. I mean, like that we kind of can feel that's what's gonna happen, even though what we're watching right now, having KJ for 18 to 22 minutes would have been awesome. Like TCU was hot to start the game. KJ can help with that. Like that would have been great to have KJ for that moment. But and like I said, TCU is not good. So, defensively, it's not going to stand out of like, oh man, like we really needed KJ on the defensive end because, Florida gets some blocks and TCU takes a ton of bad shots. And there you go. And Ernest Uday has less offensive bag than Flory Badunga does. And he's been in the college basketball world for 3 years, but I digress.
All right, let's talk about the Hunter tie-up. That's the last thing we got to talk about in this one. If you haven't seen it, I just look it up on Twitter or something because he held on to that ball for I think it was 30 seconds, 30 total seconds after the whistle. And this is what I got to say first of all. Why did he get a technical? Why?
You were
There's
pissed about that.
literally there's literally no reason for it. Like he grabbed the ball, didn't want to let go. Like if none of the TCU players would have surrounded him, he would have given the ball right to the official. But then he got surrounded by four TCU players. I'm sorry, nobody is giving up the ball in that situation. Like if you've ever played basketball, you know how this goes. Like you're not giving up that ball. You're just not. So for Hunter to get a technical there, that was bogus. I thought that was bogus, but hey, Kansas got pretty fired up after that. Went on. I don't even know what the run was. I think it was
It was 47,
27-13.
46.
27 to 13 Kansas after that play.
Dude, like that, a lot of energy there. I had a moment my senior year in the sub-state championship game where I did exactly that and then got yanked by my coach as the student section's chanting my name for being a little feisty little prick. I'm getting yelled at on the sideline. It's Jackson Bezdek. What are you doing? And then he subbed me right back in 20 seconds later because it was a huge energy play. And yeah, it is a jerk move to do that. Like Self even said that after the game. He was like called Hunter a bonehead or whatever it was. I don't know.
I'll say the
Read
quote
it.
right
Read it.
now. He said, I thought it was I can't speak to what Jamie said. I thought it was asinine that our guy would hang on to the ball like that. I guess maybe in some world it provides more street cred, which in the world that somebody would actually think that, I don't think they're very knowledgeable about ball. But it was a bonehead play. It was a bonehead play as much as anything. I mean, when the whistle blows, you stop, and I'm sure they blew it several times and it cost us a possession. So yeah, I wasn't happy to see that at all. Come on, Bill. Come on.
Asinine's pretty crazy. But
Come
like,
on,
you'll
Bill.
give up that possession for the energy that gave our whole team. That's the only time Hunter has showed any fight since Duke. Since the Duke game. That's the only time anyone on our team has shown any fight. So I was all for it. Is Bill right? Yeah, he's kind of right.
I don't know if he actually feels that way. I think he just had to say that.
He had to say it for
He
the
better
media.
not feel that way. He
Think he's
better
saying
not.
it for the media. His comments are correct, but like everyone in that locker room is talking about that today. Like that was awesome, dude. Like good work on that. That really fired us up. So I really think that's a big momentum changer. Like somebody on our team get pissed off about something, and of course it was Hunter being a jerk. So like there you go.
Yeah, I thought it was an awesome play. I mean, even Fran Fraschilla was loving it on the broadcast. Like
Yeah,
he was like, he was loving it. And how could you not? I mean, how seriously, how could you not? That was entertaining to say the least. It was entertaining, got everybody fired up. All right, last thing before we preview Houston with our guest here, Joseph Duarte. We got to look at these Big 12 standings because this Houston game means a lot towards them, and this is kind of the time of year when you start looking at the path to the Big 12 crown. Right now, Houston, only team in the conference that is undefeated. They're 7-0. Then you got Iowa State and Arizona at 6-1. Then Kansas and Texas Tech are 5-2. Then you got West Virginia and Baylor at 4-3. I don't think there's anybody outside of those seven who have really any fighting chance to win this league. And if I'm being completely honest, I think Houston, Iowa State, Kansas, and Arizona are really the only major players here. I get the Tech has been pretty solid, but I just don't see them winning the conference this year. What do you think, Bez? I mean, Kansas, they got Houston and Baylor as the tough road games left. If you can win one out of two of those and sweep the rest at home, I think Kansas has a chance to win this thing. And of course, they got Texas Tech, Arizona at home, and then still Iowa State at home. Uh, I don't know. I think the path is kind of there for Kansas, maybe if they hold serve at home. It definitely is a possibility.
Totally. I can absolutely see it. The Big 12 is just, I'm so disappointed. It is so much weaker than I thought it was going to
Oh
be. I
yeah.
mean, the bottom is not good. Like, did you see what Houston did to Utah? Those poor Utes, man. I mean, what was that? The back end of our conference is so bad. And like you said, Baylor, terrible. I'm willing to put my hat on them being a bad basketball team. I think they're very talented. They're not a good team. West Virginia, kind of the opposite. Not a ton of talent there, but well coached. They play hard. West Virginia culture.
Missing their best player still.
And
So
like the tech thing, I think just because they've been so good on the road to start is like you have all those back end home games that you probably think you're going to win. So record wise, they might actually be okay. But you're right. The four best teams are in the top four spots right now. And as the four teams that we said before the season were the four best teams, maybe Baylor, but no, these are always the four. And you take care of business at home. You drop two more road games, maybe. That's four losses in conference play total. That's going to get the job done a lot of the time. I think Arizona drops to 5, but the issue you run into is Iowa State and Houston. They're going to beat up on each other, I guess, but record-wise, Houston's already 7-0. And if you're already kind of thinking Kansas is going to finish around 4 losses like I do, where are you finding 5 losses for Houston? That's just tough to do.
Houston, I do think, has one of the toughest roads left. Right? They have at West Virginia, at Arizona. They play Texas Tech twice. They play Baylor twice, and then they have Iowa State at home. So I feel like their road is a lot harder than Kansas's. Uh, I
I
don't know.
totally
I
agree with
think you're
that.
right here, but I don't. Yeah, for Houston, this is why this game's so big.
Yeah.
If you're able to knock Houston to one loss, like Kansas is gonna have to maybe lose one or two more games because I mean, unless West Virginia plays lights out, don't really see Houston losing that. At Arizona will be tough. I don't really see them losing to Texas Tech or Baylor, and then they get Iowa State at home. So I could be wrong, but that is probably one of the harder roads here. Iowa State has at Kansas, at Houston, Arizona twice. Besides that, they really don't play much of anybody, and then Arizona has at Baylor, at Kansas, Iowa State twice, and then they get Tech and Houston at home, which isn't too shabby. So a lot of ball left, but if Kansas wins this game against Houston, like I'm in for a potential Big 12 title run.
Oh yeah, I take our schedule over all 4 of those, and you agree too. Like that, Kansas has a very nice draw coming up, and I don't even think Baylor's a tough road game, dude. I am so out on Baylor. I mean, I went and watched them play one time and was sick to my stomach, and Then they lost to this terrible TCU team that we watched last night.
And almost lost to Kansas State. They were
True.
struggling in that game. They
Gosh,
were
that team
struggling.
was
Pulled
so
it
good.
out in the end, but
So disappointing. But like, dude, can't just take care of business in the games you win the games you're favored in, you give yourself a very good chance to win the Big 12. That's what it comes down to.
yep. I think the Jayhawks could do it. Just really Houston and Baylor are the two road games left that are like, man, like I don't know about those. So again, if you win one out of two of those, sweep at home, I think Kansas is winning this conference. I really do. That would be three losses. It's going to be hard. Granted, to beat Iowa State and Arizona and Tech, these good teams at home, but
That West Virginia loss is all time bad, man.
I
I
know,
mean,
dude. I
ugh.
know. How nice would 6-1 look right now?
It would look wonderful going in because then you win on Saturday. You're first in the conference.
Yeah.
Actually, if Iowa State would win, they would be first and Kansas would be second. But either way, it's like you look at these road games. Like maybe BYU, dude. Maybe
No,
give you a shot.
no.
Maybe they're another talented team. And then you got we haven't talked about at Manhattan. And like
Kansas ain't losing at Manhattan.
they better not, dude, because I'm freaking sick of that. They're so freaking bad. Man, poor Big 12. I was wrong about the Big 12. I thought they were going to be the SEC, what the SEC is, and it's just not
What
good.
was it? Was it five, six teams in the top 10 preseason? I think
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
five. And
What
it
in
was
like
a
the top
record.
12? It was the top four, and then Baylor, and Tech was like 15th, I think.
Yeah. I think it was five teams in the preseason top 10 was a record. And it hasn't exactly shaped out that way. The top of the league is still really good, though. Houston, Iowa State, Arizona, Kansas. Uh, I mean, I low key kind of put that up against the top of the SEC right now.
Oh yeah, the top is just fine. The top is just fine. It's just like TCU is worse than I thought they'd be. Oklahoma State is as bad as I thought they'd be. K-State's as bad as I thought they'd be. Colorado's worse than I thought they'd be. BYU's worse than I thought they'd be.
Arizona
Utah's
State.
terrible. UCF
Arizona
is a
State has
complete
been good.
disaster. Arizona State is like whatever. Cincinnati's a big disappointment. They were ranked in the non-con and now they're bottom of the Big 12. There's just a lot. We can keep going. I mean, there's just a lot of not great teams filling out that middle and bottom.
Yep. All
Go
right.
win it. Let's go win it.
Let's win it. Let's win it. Why not? Why not, Bez? Why not?
I have nothing better to do. So.
All right, y'all. That is all we have to kind of recap the TCU game, looking ahead at the Big 12 standings. Stay tuned with us. We are going to be previewing Houston with Joseph Duarte right up next.
There is no sport in America that is more difficult to follow than college basketball. It can be overwhelming. That's where the Field of 68 Daily comes into play. The Daily is your go-to source for injury updates, recruiting news, and transfer portal additions that actually matter. For just $50 a year, get access to the same information that your favorite team's coaching staff is subscribed for. Quality content can be hard to find in the college basketball space. The Daily is here to help you with that.
Welcome back, everybody, to The Hum, a Kansas Hoops podcast via the Field of 68. We now have Joseph Duarte to cover this Houston game with us. He's been covering the University of Houston for the Houston Chronicle for about 29 years. So really, there's no bigger expert on the Cougs than this guy. So thank you for joining us today. And how are you doing? I heard you got some snow.
Yeah, we got a little bit of that powder on the on the windows and on the yard. Yeah, is well, 5 inches of snow will shut down the city of Houston. That's pretty much what happened last couple of days. Pushed back the Utah game a day, but we're thawed out now. So looking forward to milder temperatures as we go to Kansas City this weekend or Lawrence.
I hate to tell you, but I don't think the temperatures are going to be much better
Much milder.
here in Lawrence. Uh, let's go ahead and get into this. This is a huge matchup, obviously, on Saturday between Houston and Kansas. And I saw your tweet last night that Houston's 16 straight Big 12 regular seasons wins is the fourth longest in Big 12 history. The record is 23, which is, of course, set by the Kansas Jayhawks. That was between 2001 and 2003. And the last time that Houston lost was to guess who? Kansas, and it was in the very building that Houston will be walking into on Saturday. So, my first question to you is this. What do you just think of this streak that Houston is on? And is it surprising at all to you that they've kind of been able to just come into the Big 12 from the American and just kind of dominate this conference?
Well, that's sort of the impressive part. You look at how it started last year. They lost back to back. I believe it was Iowa State and TCU, and they haven't lost back to back, but I think one other time. And Kelvin Sampson's 11 years, so it didn't get off to the best start. And then they go to Lawrence and lose a game that really wasn't even as close as the final score said. And I remember walking through the concourse with Kelvin Sampson, and he admittedly said, "Hey, look, this is what happens to a lot of teams when they come into Fog Allen." Thought that they just did not play well at all. But then you look at what's happened since, and they haven't lost a Big 12 regular season game in nearly a year. They've been dominant during this stretch, and that ending after the Kansas game last year is what sort of propelled them, or did propel them, to the Big 12 regular season title. So to come in year one, win a championship, that was huge, and now to see what they're doing again, it really has been remarkable. I think overall, I saw they're like I don't know if it's 23-4 in regular season, or at least in all games, counting the Big 12 tournament. So they've come in and really played well, and these are the two teams that were picked 1-2 in the preseason. And oh, by the way, you mentioned that streak. Spots 2 and 3 are also held by Kansas in terms of, I believe it's 17 and the other one's 18. So I mean, Kansas has been the torchbearer, the standard in the league for most of the last 25 or so years, and now the new kids coming in, and Houston sort of made an early impression on what they feel like they're capable of doing.
Yeah, Houston right now, only team in the Big 12 that is still undefeated in conference play. Of course, Iowa State dropped one. I believe that was last week. Before we kind of get into this Houston roster, I just want to ask you, how are you guys health-wise right now? How are you guys just doing in that area?
Well, Houston's they're okay. Emmanuel Sharp, who's percentage points for being their leading scorer. He's one of their top, well, really one of the nationally top 3-point shooters. He sat out the Wednesday game against Utah. He twisted his ankle the day before in practice. Nothing serious. It was in a boot to sort of help him along and not have to put much pressure on it. The word right now is that he will play Saturday. Other than that, everybody's available. That they do have a key reserve, Ramon Walker, kind of a guard forward type. He hasn't played for about the last month or so because of a hand surgery that he has. He's close. I don't expect him back this weekend, but all the main guys, LJ Cryer, Jaywan Roberts, Joseph Tugler, JVA Francis, Terrence Arsenault, everybody else is good to go and will play on Saturday against Kansas.
Gotcha. Appreciate you for the update there. The biggest story to me with this Houston team coming into this year was replacing Jamal Shed. And it's hard to do. Jamal Shed, from what I've covered so far in my young career, is probably one of the best leaders I've ever seen in college basketball. And Houston picks up a guy, Milos Uzan, from the portal, from Oklahoma. How do you just think he's kind of handled taking over this point guard role?
Well, that was the storyline of the offseason. But pretty much everyone knew that after their run last year, that Jamal was going to just skip his last year and go pro. I mean, he was coming off of Big 12 Player of the Year, Naismith Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, it was just the right time. But I think Kelvin Sampson had his guy in mind pretty fast once the transfer portal opened. They've only had, I believe, 4 point guards since he's been here, and each one is selected. They have certain traits that they want, and they don't all begin as leaders. Really, none of them begin. It's sort of something that they develop. They have it in them. Kelvin identifies that, but he feels like they're brought along, and that's sort of what's happened with Milos Uzan. He doesn't have to be the leader on this team because of Pryor and Roberts and guys like that, Sharp. But what he's done has been able to get more. You can see that he's more comfortable and running the offense defensively. He's really grown. The quote that we got the other day was, Kelvin called him soft as parquet margarine in the microwave, and that he had to get tougher. So he's really kind of grown into that role. And the assist turnovers, I haven't looked at the numbers lately, but they've been really impressive. in terms of how he's cut down on the turnovers. And that's a big part of what everything goes through at the point guard position. So having that solidified, there's not going to be another Jamal Shed, but to have somebody come in and be able to solidify it, it makes this Houston team a lot more dangerous. And they typically get better as the season goes along, and we've seen that so far.
All right, I want to ask you about another guy on this team. We just had Evan Maya, college basketball
Mm-hmm.
analytics guy, on our last episode of this podcast, and he has Joseph Tugler having the third highest BPR in the country. And BPR, it basically just measures the player's overall value to his team while he's on the court. Tugler only plays 20 minutes per game, but what makes him so valuable for this Houston team in your eyes?
Right. And that number may be skewed a little bit because one, he started off the year coming back from an injury, wasn't in the starting lineup. So they kind of brought him along. And then when Francis got off to a little bit of a slower start and he was dealing with an injury, Tugler came in and has been in the starting lineup since. So maybe the numbers are a little skewed, but to your point, when we talk about what Houston could have done last year, and everybody was like, okay, they lost Jamal Shed in the first half against Duke. Kelvin Sampson will take you back to probably late February, early March when they lost Joseph Tugler to a foot injury that no one knew about. And he basically played a couple of games with that broken foot. That would have been the key or one of the biggest difference in their postseason run, according to Sampson. So, I mean, this guy can't argue. I don't know what the formula consists of completely, but in terms of difference makers, he's got about a 7'4" wingspan. He's disruptive. He's got about 42, 45 blocks. I can't count the number of ultra shots that don't show up. I mean, he's just that kind of guy that can do so much for you. And really, it showed against Utah. Utah could never get anything going outside, inside. They were doubling. And at one time, I saw a triple team on one of their best players. I believe it was Matson or it might have been Alsar. So those two guys did nothing in the game. And a lot of the credit goes to guys like Joseph Tugler, but he's a huge piece. Literally and figuratively, and I think it'll be a different postseason this time around because if the front court stays healthy, they're pretty dangerous.
Yeah, really just looking at the top eight for Houston, it's like, man, like every single dude in that top eight can guard and they can play. So I want to ask.
This is the best depth they've had
Oh, yeah.
in some time because they've dealt with injuries and most of them have been late season type or tournament type. But the rotation that they have now, he's going to go with about 8 guys. The Mercy Millers, the freshmen like that, or the Cordell Jeffersons, the kind of the back end of the bench. They're kind of developing, bringing them along. Kelvin doesn't even need them. I mean, he goes with a certain rotation. It begins with Malik Wilson. Francis will come off the bench, and then you have Terrence Arsenault. So right there, those are your 3 on top of your 5 starters. That's a pretty good 8 to begin with.
I want to ask about the guards. Obviously, LJ Cryer, Manuel Sharp, Terrence Arsenault kind of leading that backcourt. How much have they just improved from last year? I know Terrence Arsenault was hurt most of last year, but how have you just kind of seen that guard group grow?
Well, let's start with Terrence. He's come in and they monitored and limited his minutes early because he was coming off the Achilles tendon injury. He's a little bit, probably 13 months post surgery. And it's been great. You look at his line last night, and it's not just the scoring. They know that he's a capable shooter. I think he had 10 points, 6 boards, 4 steals, and maybe 3 or 4 assists. I mean, he's kind of doing a little bit of everything, and that's what they envision. That a guy that can come off the bench and provide that boost, that energy, and can also be productive. So yeah, he's a key in the rotation. LJ Cryer, he's sort of has assumed that leadership role, taking it more upon himself to be more vocal. He's already has a national championship as a freshman at Baylor, which, by the way, beat Houston that year in the semifinals in 2021. So he's a guy that came back. They can sort of count on him. He's their, the leading scorer along with Emmanuel Sharp. So you get those 3, and then they've really liked how Malik Wilson's come along. He's probably their most athletic guard. He's great defensively. He's their best dunker, so he's got a lot of that athleticism, and they feel like he's kind of an energy guy and then whatever happens with Ramon Walker, how they decide to use them. So the guard spot is deep, and Malik Wilson also fills in as a backup point guard to Uzan if they need him, or if he gets in foul trouble or needs a breather. So, they've had some pretty good guard lineups since I've been here, but this one's pretty deep, and if it stays healthy, this is another piece of the puzzle that can really help them come March.
Yeah, I think Houston has a pretty significant advantage as far as guard play compared to Kansas in this game. I think where Kansas matches up is in the paint. Obviously, you got Hunter Dickinson, Flory Badunga, no KJ Adams. KJ Adams injured right now, so it's just those two manning the paint. What do you think of this matchup just with Juan Roberts, Francis, and then Tugler, obviously? Who do you think wins that matchup?
Well, I factor in how I've seen Kelvin Sampson game plan for all sorts of big men. I remember they had Kofi Coburn from Illinois a few years ago in the Sweet 16, and they completely shut him down. They had some big men with Arizona that they had to deal with. You look at what's happened the last few games, whether it's been West Virginia or it's been Utah. They sort of they game plan perfectly from one opponent to the next. And Hunter Dickinson I don't remember what the number was, but he didn't have a bad game last year when these two played in Lawrence. But then you see what happened in the final regular season game where Houston just completely destroyed them and at the Fertitta Center. So I think if you look at numbers and the fact that all three of those main guys are playing as well as they're playing right now, because this wasn't how they were playing back in December. They were either still hurt or recovering. Roberts has really become more of aggressive, kind of an attacker type. He's got that nice little spin move, and he's got the left and right-handed hooks that he does. He's become more assertive down in the paint. So I like Houston in this one, just because they're sort of a complete team right now. We haven't been able to say that. The three losses that they had Auburn, I believe, up. They were up 9 or 11. They could have won Alabama. That went to overtime. And then the last one also went to overtime against San Diego State. So they're 11 points away from being undefeated. Now you look at, they had to survive the UCF game. But those are the type of games they didn't win earlier in the year where they were, backs against the wall. So this is as good, I think, as they're playing as they have all season. And it starts with those three guys in the front court.
Yeah, and obviously Houston just kind of absolutely destroyed Utah last night, 70-36. So coming off a pretty good game here. Before we get into kind of some keys to the game, is there anything else you think I should know about this Houston squad?
No, I think we've covered it. They've won 33 in a row at home, but they're equally tough on the road. I mean, this is a team that doesn't rattle easily. They know most places this is their Super Bowl, but again, this is Allen Fieldhouse, and we asked Kelvin Sampson after the Utah game about if they could take anything away from last year's game, and he's like, no, it was no disrespect to Kansas' statement. He's just like, it's we've got to make it another game, and that's sort of the attitude that they take. So I think they'll be pretty grounded on this one. Everything else is sort of falling in place. They have their holy trinity that they call it. There's defense, rebounding, and taking care of the ball, and they do all three of those at an elite level. Utah had 26 turnovers in the Wednesday loss, 19 steals for Houston. It was a 29-2 off of turnovers for Houston. So they make you pay for mistakes. So if it gets into one of those type of games, I'd take Houston on most nights.
I wanted to ask you about your keys to the game. You kind of mentioned some of them there. I think for Kansas, number one is take care of the ball. Can't let Houston get out and run in transition. You just got to take care of the ball against this team. Houston's going to pressure the heck out of you. With this also being a battle of two top five defenses on KenPom, I think Kansas is going to have to take and make some three-pointers if they want to win this game. But I think it's just going to be an absolute rock fight. What about you?
Yeah, and also, we don't have the most up to date injury report. So another key is what happens if Sharp doesn't play. Now, on the Utah game, I saw a wild stat. Houston could have gone scoreless the entire second half against Utah and still won by 5 points. So, if you're not going to have Emmanuel Sharp, that was probably the game that you didn't need him. Let him rest. I think that's a key because if not, Terrence Arsenault goes again, and he's a very capable fill-in. But Emmanuel Sharp in big games just gives you another level. I've never seen a guy make the type of 3-point shots that he does. He's got a quick release, but a lot of his shots, we're talking way outside, and he can just sort of turn a game with a couple of those. So that'd be a key. Rebounding, Houston, their DNA is about rebounding. I think that you have to limit, if you're Kansas, you limit how many opportunities they get. It's not even so much sometimes the rebounding. They do a stat they call tips where they will somebody will reach up, slap the ball out, and it'll end up behind the arc to a guard that's waiting, and they'll either take a open three or pass it out for somebody who has an open look. So those are the type of things Houston does. They're big on the hustle stats. They're going to dive all over the court. They're going to slide. They're going to fight. So if you get into a street fight, that's probably not the team that you want to go up against because that's who they are. They're sort of the proverbial junkyard dogs, and that's kind of the mentality they have. But I think between what you said, the health of Sharp and just having to limit the opportunity they get because they'll get 3 or 4 sometimes on one possession. They're not the greatest shooting team, but it's those second and third chances that they get that they end up converting that end up being the difference against teams.
Yeah, yeah, you mentioned it. The Iowa State game, it seemed like Kansas didn't get a single 50-50 ball, and Kansas is going to need to get some of those against Houston. I wanted to share this story with you, actually. I asked, I think it was Juan at Big 12 Media Day, his best Kelvin Sampson story, and he told me about the loose ball drill. Do you know about the loose ball drill?
Well, there's a couple of them. I mean, they do a bubble drill and they do what they call a double bubble where they cover the basket, and so every ball is going to be a rebound chance. The loop, like I said, they do several. There's one where they don't stop until the whistle, and then actually Milos Uzan ended up breaking his nose like 2 weeks before the season because him and Emmanuel Sharp collided on a loose ball. But I'd love to hear the J1 Roberts one because I don't. I mean, I have a feeling I haven't heard this one yet.
Basically, he said they literally have a drill where it's kind of like the Oklahoma drill, where they just blow the whistle, they throw out a loose ball, and you have to go get it. And actually, it might have been LJ who told me the story, but he said it was halftime at UCF last year. They kind of struggled in that one too last year, if I remember correctly. But basically, they're in the locker room, and Kelvin had Kellen and another assistant do the loose ball drill in the locker room to kind of get everybody hyped. And Houston ended up turning it around in that second half. So I think that's just kind of shows you right there. Like Houston is prepared for a rock fight, and that's what worries me. That's what worries me.
And this is a great game because you have two of the best coaches in the game. Bill's already in the Hall of Fame. Kelvin will eventually get there at some point. I guess between them, there's probably close to 16, 1,700 wins. So I will be interested to see how the back and forth goes, the adjustments, the halftime, because Houston's been down once at halftime this year, and that was to UCF. So they're pretty good about playing ahead. But when they needed to make adjustments, Kelvin's one of the best at doing that. So this one should be fun. I don't think it's going to be a blowout either way, but I could see this being 7 point, 5 point type game. At least going down the last 4 or 5 minutes of the game.
You got an exact score prediction? I'm going to go 62-60 Kansas. I can't pick against Kansas.
Right.
The KU fans always get mad at me whenever I do. So
60 sort of that magical number for Houston. It is a road game, so I would probably lean towards maybe a couple of extra points for Kansas. I think it ends up being. I think to me, I think Houston wins this game. I think this will be a sending a message type game because they still feel like even as the defending champion, they look around and they're a 4 or 5 seed projected
nobody's
right now.
talking about him. Nobody's talking about him. Doesn't make any
Nobody,
sense.
and that's probably the best thing for them because They were the number one seed a couple of times, and they lost to Alabama in the regular season once, and then they got knocked off again by I'm not sure who at the other point, but they've sort of been in that number one talk by this time the last few years, and the fact that they're not, people are there was a voter in the AP poll that didn't rank them for 7 straight weeks. And then this week, suddenly they're 12th on the ballot. So, I mean, that's the kind of things that they don't look at, but they do look at. And that's why I think if you go into Lawrence and you have a good game, and whether you pull it out or it's a close loss, you if you're Houston, you have more to gain than I think if you're Kansas. So this is going to be a tight race. If you're Kansas and you lose a third one by this point, that gets a little dicey. I think that the Houston Iowa State game in a few weeks is going to be massive in terms of the implications, because if Houston were to win that one and it's at home where they're really tough to beat, I think then you start hearing the talk about, well, maybe these guys aren't getting the kind of respect they deserve. Maybe they're a 2 or a 1, maybe that
Definitely
last
aren't.
one.
They
Yeah,
definitely aren't.
and so this would be a great race. I think you're looking, and I'm not quite sold yet on Arizona. I think Texas Tech could be one of those outliers that sneaks up on a few people. They're tough in Lubbock. So between Houston, Iowa State, Kansas, Texas Tech, and maybe Arizona and West Virginia up until this week West Virginia would have been on my deal. I think right now it's about 3 to 4 teams that could play a big role in this, and two of them are on the court together Saturday.
Yeah, should be a good one. I know Allen Fieldhouse is going to be absolutely rocking. And then, of course, you got the Chiefs the next day. So everybody's going to be in town for this one. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us on the Hum. That is all we have today, y'all. We will be back after this Houston game, I think with Rob Doster, founder of the Field of 68, will be chatting about that Houston game with us and previewing what's coming up for Kansas. So, thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time, and thank you again, Joseph.
Appreciate you for
I
having me
hope to
on.
see you at the game. Be at the game.
Absolutely, I'll be there, and I've been there twice. Actually, real quick, my first trip there, I covered the Longhorns in 05, 06, 07. So it was Kevin Durant's freshman year, his only year in Austin. Texas went up to Lawrence, ended up losing that game. I think Durant had maybe 25 or so. That was my first experience at Fog Allen. They actually had the media on the court on the baseline, so that was kind of a cool experience. Last year I went, phenomenal crowd. I was amazed that the students get there as early as they do. And that place from the get go with the chant, the Rock Chalk chant, it's a fun place. If you've never been, that's a bucket list. And I'm glad to say that I've gotten that one out of the way. And I'm glad to say I've never had to deal with the snow driving from Kansas City to Lawrence. So I had dealt with it a little bit going to Manhattan, but that's another story.
All right, Joseph.